All right. Good afternoon. If you could please take your seats, we'd like to get started. I'm Alan Ladwig, the head of public outreach in the Office of Communication at NASA headquarters, and I get to be your host for the award ceremony. Being somewhat IT challenged, it was a thrill to be asked to participate and to be the MC. Some of you may remember my wife Debbie from her days as the chief of staff at the headquarters CIO office. When I told her I was going to participate in the award ceremony, she assumed it was to receive the Booby Prize for the most calls to the help desk. So what would I do without Odin? I love them. Under the heading of administrative details, I've been asked to remind you that the general sessions are being streamed live and will be available on the NASA website for later viewing. Also, out of respect for the speakers, please switch your cell phones to mute or stun. We have a slight change in the sequence of events for this session. Due to another commitment, you'll hear from our first speaker before you have your complete lunch, and that speaker is Vivek Kundra, the Chief Information Officer of the United States government. It's his job to manage and oversee the IT operations of the entire federal government, making them more efficient and enabling more information to be available online. Located within the Office of Management and Budget, Vivek oversees a budget of $76 billion. I don't suppose you'd lend us $3 billion that we need for NASA that the Augustine Committee recommended, but that's another story. His domain encompasses 71,000 federal IT workers and more than 10,000 IT systems. He also chairs the Federal CIO Council, comprised of the CIOs of federal departments and agencies. If you think it's hard getting the IT operations of NASA headquarters and 10 centers to all be on the same page, imagine what his job is like. It's amazing he didn't walk in here with his eyes going counterclockwise. This is not his first appearance before a NASA audience, as last September he rolled out the new federal cloud computing portal, apps.gov, during an event at the NASA Ames Research Center in Moffett Field, California. In the Summit Program booklet, you can read more about Vivek's background and how he became the nation's first CIO, but suffice to say, he's a certified computer geek, and I'm betting that he's also a closet space cadet. So we're glad he was able to join us today. Please give a big galactic welcome to Vivek Kundra.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I want to thank and recognize Linda Curitin, the CIO of NASA, for pulling together this event on focusing on the positive side of IT in terms of how do we move from an environment where we've had a history of colossal failures when it comes to IT systems to making federal IT stellar, and the ability to convene so many of you in this room to have a battle of ideas in terms of how we move forward and how we take things to the next level is exactly what we need to be doing more of in this administration. I still remember my first day in office. I recall being handed a stack of PDF documents and I was told, congratulations, welcome to the federal government. Here are over $26 billion worth of IT projects that are way over budget and way behind schedule. And when I say they're way behind schedule and way over budget, let me just give you a couple of examples. At the Veterans Administration, in 1998, the VA tried to modernize its financial system. After spending $250 million, in 2004, that project failed. It was restarted again in 2005, and it was just terminated again last month because of the inability to execute. At the Department of Defense, after spending 12 years and approximately $1 billion, DoD canceled its integrated human resource system. Now, I wish those were the only examples of failures in federal IT, Unfortunately, there are many more projects like this. That is why in the Obama administration, what we did is we focused on a number of things to make sure that we could turn around how we're spending money on information technology projects to make sure that they're producing dividends for the American people. The first thing we did, consistent with the President's philosophy of an open, transparent, and participatory government, is that we launched the IT dashboard within 60 days. As a reflect on the last 18 months, there are a number of accomplishments that move us closer to making sure that we have a higher statistical likelihood that when we invest in IT projects that they're actually going to deliver. When we launched the IT dashboard, that was a huge shift in terms of culture. We moved from an environment which was closed, opaque, and secretive to an environment that became transparent, open, and participatory. And the challenge there was shining light on over $76 billion of IT investments. We literally also started putting up the pictures of the CIOs. You can go and check out Linda's picture right next to every single IT investment at NASA. And the idea was we didn't want a culture of faceless accountability. We wanted to make sure that we were holding each other accountable for the performance of these investments. Shortly after we launched the IT dashboard, thanks in part due to this dashboard, the VA reviewed 45 IT projects, which it ended up halting, out of which it terminated 12 of these investments. We were able to also look at trends across the government, recognizing some of the challenges in federal IT, and we launched in January of this year TechSet accountability sessions. And these sessions are data-driven sessions focused on solving some of the most difficult problems across the federal government. The first TechSet session we convened was on financial systems at EPA. This was a project that was over a year behind schedule, $30 million over budget. But when we looked at that project, we thought maybe, this is a problem across the board. And very quickly, we discovered financial systems across the federal government were way behind schedule, way over budget, scoped to the point where it was unrealistic to expect that they would actually deliver on time and on budget. That is why the Obama administration took on some of these really tough problems by issuing a policy that halted across the board future task orders on 30 major financial systems across the federal government. We had to say enough. We've spent money on these information technologies that haven't produced dividends. The VA example, where it failed twice already. And part of what we're doing is we're going through a rigorous process to crack down on waste and reform these projects so they have the ability to produce the dividends that we're looking for. But we also are going through a process where we're putting some of these really troubled IT projects on a high-risk list, which will be released shortly. Over the last month, I've sat down with every major agency within the CIO Council and reviewed with its agencies collaboratively projects that may be behind schedule, over budget, or off course when it comes to the mission objectives, to figure out how we actually turn them around as part of the 2012 budget process. It's imperative that every dollar we invest in this fiscal environment, where there is a discretionary freeze minus national security and defense, and on top of that, the 5% cuts when it comes to budget guidance, that the investments we're making in technology don't end up becoming wasteful. But we also recognize that we're operating in a system where procurements take far too long, where architecture isn't coordinated across the enterprise. At the Department of Interior, for example, the Secretary wanted to send an email department-wide, and he couldn't because all the systems were siloed. There are over 200 data centers, thousands of servers, and the life cycle costs are about $7.5 billion in infrastructure at the Department of Interior. Yet, achieving a simple task of sending an email department-wide couldn't be done. Those are some of the challenges that we need to confront. That is why we're sitting down with every department to make sure that as we go into the 2012 budget process, we're looking at the infrastructure, an area that's easy to ignore, but where we spend significant dollars, approximately $20 billion annually. That is why we drove a zero growth policy when it came to data centers. As we've grown the number of data centers from 1998 from about 432 to over 1,100, it's important for us to stop the madness of proliferating these data centers without recognizing that we need to take an enterprise view government-wide, let alone at the department level. And that is what's happening today with NASA as you're looking at your infrastructure investments. I recall launching our cloud computing initiative last year at the Ames Research Center. And a big part of that was to look at NASA as a leader in this space, investing in breakthrough technologies, rethinking the way we deploy technology through initiatives like the Nebula platform that is being leveraged by a number of agencies across the federal government. That is why what we need to be able to do is, as we crack down on waste on one end, we need to be able to find the innovative path that moves us away from spending billions of dollars in commodity IT that frankly could be better spent as CIOs lift up and not focus just on the data centers and focus on networks and focus on architecture, but actually think about IT investments and how they impact everyday Americans. What I mean by that is, when the IRS and the Department of Education got together, they were able to solve a problem around student aid applications. It used to take dozens of questions, and students would give up filling out these applications because they're so complicated, and somebody would have to file all their tax information coupled with all the education information. We're asking the same question multiple times because the government was organized in the context of what was convenient to the government rather than the American people. But when the IRS and Department of Education got together, they're able to simplify the student aid application to the point where now they're sharing data collaboratively, it's making it a lot easier, and it's customer friendly. If we think about other areas like USCIS, we were able to simplify the application process at USCIS by asking a simple question, which is that why is it that in our personal lives we can go online and track our package, whether we're on FedEx or USPS, yet when it comes to figuring out where our application is, we have no idea. You've got to hire a lawyer, pay thousands of dollars to figure out where the government is in processing of those applications. And that is the shift we want to drive across the federal government, which is to get the IT community, innovators like you in this room, to lift up, abstract from this siloed approach where we continue to invest billions of dollars annually to working together to make sure that the investments we're making actually produce dividends for the American people, and that the only way a project ends is not when it becomes a bad headline or a bad story, but we're proactively managing our IT portfolios, cracking down on waste, making sure that if these projects are not going to perform, that we actually halt them or terminate them. And through the tech set processes, we're moving towards focusing on these projects because we looked at 50 years of history. And there are a number of great ideas, policies, and legislation. If you think about the Klinger-Cohen Act, the eGov Act, countless memos from OMB, a number of these ideas are the right answers, breaking down projects into smaller pieces, making sure we've got the right governance structures, making sure we've got the appropriate policy oversight. Yet, we continue to fail when it comes to execution. And that is my charge to you today, is to think through how can we apply these game-changing technologies and approaches as far as making sure that the next set of dollars we invest in information technology are spent wisely and actually produce the results we're looking for. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to working with everybody here as we try to take information technology to the next level. And as a theme of this conference, how do we take the learnings, the best practices at NASA and scale them government-wide. Thank you.